And now let's move to the UK, where a big debate is starting. This debate is about whether letting people choose to end their own life or not. To die or not to die, that is the question. Throughout the UK, current laws prevent people from asking for medical help to die. Euthanasia is illegal under English law and is considered manslaughter or murder. To encourage or assist a suicide is also illegal. Similar laws exist in Northern Ireland and Scotland. But now, proposals to give terminally ill people in England and Wales the right to choose to end their life have been introduced in the Parliament. A separate bill is already under discussion in Scotland. Labour MP Kim Leadbeater's terminally ill adults end-of-life bill would give terminally ill people in England and Wales the right to end their life. The bill would have to be approved by MPs and peers before it becomes law. In 2015, MPs rejected a bill on the same issue. This current bill will be debated in the House of Commons next month. It is a big debate, and today in our show we are pleased to be joined by Dr. Gordon MacDonald, the CEO of Care Not Campaign, who says that this bill is dangerous and disappointing. Let's try to understand why. Hello, Dr. Gordon. Welcome to the show.
Hello. How are you?
Thank you for giving us your time. First of all, can you please explain a little bit for our audiences what exactly does this bill propose and what is the government trying to do?
Well, it's a private member's bill, so it's an individual member. The government is neutral on it and will allow MPs to have what's called a free vote, where they can vote according to their conscience. But what the bill proposes is that people who are deemed to be terminally ill, where a doctor has said that they have an illness that will lead to their death. We don't know within what time frame at the moment. It might be 6 months, it might be 12 months. Would be given assistance by the doctor to end their life. And we expect that there will be a High Court judge involved as well. We haven't actually seen the bill yet. It hasn't been published. We've just got the proposal and the title. But, you know, the basic problem is that doctors can't give an exact prediction on how long people will have to live. I had a colleague whose father was diagnosed with terminal illness and given 6 months to live, and he lived for 11 years.
Yes.
So, you know, this is not an exact science, and it's easy for people who want to change the law to make all sorts of assurances. But the reality is there are no assurances in relation to this area, and in fact, what we should be doing is caring for people rather than helping them to end their lives.
Okay, so you've been campaigning against this thing since a very long time. So can you tell me why exactly is this bill dangerous in your opinion, and what will be its implications and how can it be misused?
Well, I think there's a number of issues. One issue is that many people who have a terminal illness are depressed. It's understandable that depression is associated with terminal or chronic illness. And so there's an immediate question as to whether or not we're addressing the issues of depression and that's being treated or not. That's not the case in places like Oregon and Canada. You know, in Oregon, only 1% of those who have an assisted suicide are referred for a psychiatric evaluation and support, and probably 25% of them at least are depressed. So there's a huge gap there in terms of care for people's mental health when they're struggling with terminal or chronic illness. And then secondly, you've got to say, well, who will this law apply to? How will it be expanded? So, you know, if your basis upon which you're legislating is individual choice or personal autonomy, then why would you limit it just to people who are terminally ill when other people might be suffering more? So there is a logic for expansion, and we've seen that in Canada. In Canada, the law was introduced as a result of a court case. It was meant to be just for people who were terminally ill, only for a very small number of people. They said it wouldn't be as bad as the Netherlands, but actually what's happened is the law has expanded rapidly. They brought in a broader law, so it now applies not just to people who are terminally ill, but people who have got any form of irremediable suffering. From 2027 it will apply to people who are just have mental health problems, and you know, that's what's happened in Canada, and we've seen the numbers increase from 1,000 in the first year to over 15,000 such deaths last year. If you take the Netherlands, where, you know, there has been a euthanasia law in place for many years now, for 20 odd years now, you know, 8,000 people, over 8,000, 8,500 people had their lives ended by euthanasia last year. But an awful lot more people actually were just sedated with heavy doses of sedation and left to dehydrate or starve to death. 25% of all deaths in the Netherlands are intentionally caused by the doctor now. That's an appalling statistic and an awful way for medicine to have developed in the Netherlands, and yet it seems to be little soul searching within the Netherlands as to why they're doing what they're doing.
So basically it's become an ethical dilemma, and I think that's the reason why the Archbishop of Canterbury has said that this is also dangerous and this would lead to a slippery slope.
Absolutely, and you know, the slippery slope can take various forms. It can be in terms of the escalation in numbers, which happens in every jurisdiction in the world, or it can be in terms of legislative change, as has happened in Canada, or it can be in reinterpreting the definitions that have been established in law, as has happened in Oregon. So, for example, in Oregon now, although it still applies to terminal illness has been redefined to include people who refuse treatment, where it might lead to their death. So there have been cases of people with anorexia, for example, eating disorders, who have been given assistance to end their lives. Now, clearly that's a mental health problem, but it has a physical outcome. And so because of that, they've deemed it to be terminal illness. But that's just not what was ever expected or intended when the law was introduced, but that's what has happened there now.
Okay, so what would be the solution? Like you see, there are so many people who are terminally ill, and what can be done in their case to help them? Because if you consider religion says it's fate and they have to live with it. But what other options do we have?
Well, I think we need to look at improving palliative care. I mean, palliative care is very good in the UK, but there's still huge gaps. 1 in 4 people with cancer don't get all the palliative care needs that they have met. Especially, you know, out of hours or in the community. Hospices are underfunded in the UK, you know, and the UK is probably the best in the world. There's a need for palliative care, you know, to be developed as a core part of healthcare all over the world, actually, but particularly in the UK. And if you do properly fund palliative care, there are 2 benefits. One benefit is clearly for the patients who have their physical, but also their spiritual and emotional needs addressed. Mm-hmm. And often that helps with any suffering and relieves any suffering in the vast majority of cases. But there's also a second benefit, which is that it actually saves money in healthcare budgets, because what you don't have is unnecessary hospital admissions and all the costs that are associated with that if we care for people in the community. There is a very good article that Michael Nazir Ali has written in the Times today, which talks about, you know, palliative care and you know, looking at it more from a faith perspective as to, you know, the fact that autonomy is a limited concept. It's not an absolute, and that, you know, ultimately we all are accountable, and life is a gift from God. But you know, but even if you leave aside the faith arguments, there are lots and lots of practical secular reasons not to introduce this legislation, and alternatively to look for care, and palliative care in particular.
Okay, and let's talk about the past. In 2015, such a bill was presented in the Parliament, it was debated, and the Parliament was of the opinion that this law cannot be implemented safely, so it was rejected. Is the stance changing now, especially with the Prime Minister openly stating that he is in favour of change in the law? Is there such a fear?
Well, I think it will certainly be a closer result than it was back in 2015, and clearly this is the first time we've had a Prime Minister who's been personally in favour. All the previous Prime Ministers have either been opposed, or in the case of Rishi Sunak, he was a bit ambivalent and didn't really have a clear view. So this is the first time we have somebody who is personally in favour, and that may swing some of the new Labour MPs, obviously, but you know, we don't expect that this is going to be overwhelmingly supported in the Parliament. We'll have to wait and see what happens on the day. But my feeling is that an awful lot of the new MPs are feeling that they're being rushed into this. They're not happy about it. They don't really know what they think about it yet. They're concerned about safeguarding issues. And we'll have to wait and see how they vote on the day. But my feeling is that this needs to be, we need to step back from the brink here, and we need to give people time to think the issue through, because the more people think the issue through, the less likely they are to support it, because they realise it just isn't safe. And despite all the assurances, you know, the Danish Ethics Council looked into this at the request of the Danish Parliament and came to the conclusion that there wasn't a safe system of euthanasia or assisted suicide anywhere in the world, and that it's impossible to have a safe system. There will always be people who will be the victims of this, who shouldn't be being given help to end their life, and it's impossible to stop that from being the case. So that's why we shouldn't change the law.
Now, talking about MP Kim Leadbeater, she said that it's not about taking people's lives, it's about shortening their deaths. What do you think?
Well, I think that's just spin and hyperbole, quite frankly. You know, we all are going to die, so you could apply that to everybody, every one of us. You know, I think this is about helping people. What we should be doing is helping people to live the fullest possible life they have until their natural death. That is what good medicine is. And we shouldn't prolong life unnecessarily, but neither should we shorten it unnecessarily or hasten it. And that's what medicine has been about since the time of Hippocrates in 330 BC or so. And to throw that out and introduce a system whereby doctors become essentially state executioners is an absolute disgrace and shocking thing to do. A
very dangerous idea indeed. Finally, talking about the public opinion. Now, BBC says that polling in recent years has consistently shown 60 to 75% of the British people support such a law. Is the public opinion also changing in favour of such laws?
Well, actually, the public opinion hasn't changed over time. If you look at the opinion polls, it's stayed fairly steady. And what you see is that people, when they're initially asked, will yes express that view, because generally the public in Britain don't want to impose on other people, and they say, well, live and let people do what they want. But once the public start to understand what the complicated issues are with this concept, they then change their mind. So there was a poll back in 2015 which we had conducted, and once 5 arguments were presented to the public, the level of support dropped from 72% to 43%. So what you see is that public opinion is very fluid on this issue. People are not got a fixed view. They haven't really thought about it. Do think about it, they change their mind and oppose it. And even the most recent poll that came out in June this year showed that of those who support it in principle, 56% of them don't think it's possible to do it safely in practice. So even a majority of those who support it actually think it's not safe to do in practice. So it's a difference between people's in principle support and the practicalities of actually implementing it, and that's why public opinion is so fluid on this issue.
Okay, thank you Dr. Gordon, thank you for giving us your जी ये थी बात यूनाइटेड किंगडम की, यूके की, जहां पर अब एक कानून सामने आया है कि जिसके अंदर अब जाहिर है डिबेट होनी है, इस कानून ने इम्प्लीमेंट होना है अगर ये कानून पार्लियामेंट से पास हो गया, कि लोगों को, उन लोगों को जो कि बहुत ज़्यादा शदीद बीमार होते हैं, क्या उन्हें अपनी ज़िंदगी लेने की, अपनी जान लेने की इजाज़त दी जाए या नहीं। बहुत सारे ग्रुप ऐसे हैं जो कि कह रहे हैं कि लोगों को इसकी इजाज़त होनी चाहिए, और बहुत सारे लोग ऐसे हैं जो ये कहते हैं कि लोगों को इसकी इजाज़त नहीं होनी चाहिए।